ask you? I would like to read for you all a story that has been near and dear to my heart for so many years. A story that has so many fond memories for me. And I hope after you listen to this that it'll have just as many for you. That story is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I've loved this story for a long time, as I've just said, and I'm very, very happy that I now finally have the chance to produce it. I would like to say to you all, before I begin, that I hope that no matter where you are, no matter what situation you may be in, no matter how it is you might be feeling, that you're somewhere warm, safe, and comfortable. And that all of you enjoy this narration just as much as I enjoy putting all of it together. I have endeavored in this ghostly little book to raise the ghost of an idea, which shall not put my readers out of humour with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. Their faithful friend and servant, C.D. December 1843. Stave One. Marleys Ghost. Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. As dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead? Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? For Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. And even he was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that Scrooge was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marleys. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marleys. Sometimes people called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, secret and self-contained, as solitary as an oyster. No one ever stopped him in the streets to inquire the time, nor give it to him. But what did he care? It was the very thing he liked. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. It was very cold outside, and in Scrooge's office it was not much warmer either. Scrooge had a very small fire, but his clerk, Bob Cratchit's fire, was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, Fred, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" "Christmas a humbug, Uncle?" said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "What right have you to be dismal?" asked Fred. "You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said, "Bah! bah again, and followed it up with humbug. Don't be cross, uncle, said the nephew. What else can I be, returned the uncle, when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. Ha! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills with money you haven't got? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer. If I could work my will, any idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. Now I suggest you keep Christmas in your way, and let me keep it in mine. Keep it, repeated Fred. But you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone, then, said Scrooge. Well, uncle, I believe that Christmas is a loving, honest, and charitable time, and though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say God bless it. Humbug! Shouted Scrooge. Oh, uncle, don't be cross, said Fred. Come, dine with Clara and I tomorrow. Absolutely not, said Scrooge with a shake of his fist. Oh, well, said Fred. I tried. You are still welcome if you change your mind. A Merry Christmas to you, and a Happy New Year. And with that, Fred left the office without an angry word. However, in doing so, Fred let in 2 more gentlemen. You see, during these times it was customary on Christmas Eve for well-meaning gentlemen to call upon businesses, collecting donations for the poor and homeless. Scrooge and Marleys, I believe, said one of the men. Yes, and who are you? Asked Scrooge, annoyed. We're here to collect a donation, said one of the gentlemen. You see, during this festive time of year, many of us feel as though we must take care of the poor and homeless. How much can we put you down for? Nothing, said Scrooge. You wish to remain anonymous? Asked one of the men. I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. And are there no prisons, no workhouses? Oh, plenty of those, sir, said the man. My taxes go to pay for them, said Scrooge. The homeless must go there. I but some would rather die, said the second gentleman. Well, said Scrooge, if they'd rather die, then they'd better do it, and decrease the surplus population. I do not make merry myself at Christmas, and I most certainly cannot afford to make idle people merry. Good afternoon. And with a glare at the both of them, Scrooge swept the men from his office. When the clock struck 9 and it was time to close, Scrooge spoke to his clerk, Bob Cratchit. You'll want all day off tomorrow, I presume? If it's oversigned to you, sir, if it's all right, said the clerk. It's not all right, said Scrooge, and it isn't fair. After all, I have to pay you for the day, although you don't work. But it's only once a year, sir, observed Bob. A pretty poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every December the 25th. But as I seem to be the only one around here who knows that, I suppose you must have your day off. But be here all the earlier the next morning. Overjoyed, Cratchit promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the men went their separate ways towards home. Scrooge lived in a house which had once belonged to his dead partner, Jacob Marley. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile up a yard. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge himself, all of the other rooms being used as offices. The yard was so dark when he arrived that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, had to grope with his hands. The fog and frost lay so thickly about the gate that it seemed as if the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker upon the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place, and had given no thought to his old partner since his death, 7 years past that very night. And then, all at once, something very strange happened. As he put his key in the lock, he saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but the face of his dead partner, Jacob Marley. It was not a shadow as the other objects in the yard had been, but a dismal light it had about it, like a flickering candle in a lantern. It was neither angry nor ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. "Humbug!" said Scrooge, and looked again, but all at once it was a knocker once more. Quite satisfied, he closed the door, but locked himself in, which is something he never did. Up Scrooge went, up the dark, broad staircase, trimming his candle as he went, and caring not a button for the darkness. For darkness was cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was well. He had just enough recollection of the face to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, a small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and a little saucepan of gruel, Scrooge had a cold in his head, upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown. Lumber room as usual. Old fire guard, old shoes, 2 fish baskets, washing stand on 3 legs, and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and double-locked that as well. Quite content, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. Scrooge had only just settled in when his glance happened to fall upon an old unused bell high in the roof. As he looked at it, wide-eyed, it all of a sudden began to swing. At first it swung so softly that it barely made a sound. But then, all at once, it and every bell in the house began to peal out loudly. This might have happened for a moment, maybe less, but then suddenly as it began, it stopped. Scrooge had only just composed himself when he was startled once more by a clanking noise, as if someone were dragging a heavy chain in the cellar. Then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below. Then, coming up the stairs. Then, coming closer still. A figure came on through the heavy door. It was Marley. It had to be, for it looked just like him. All except for the chain. The chain that wound round him like a tail. The chain made of old cash boxes, purses, keys, coins, and God knew what else. "Who are you?" trembled Scrooge. "Ask me who I was," said the spectre. "You're awfully particular for a shade," observed Scrooge. "Who were you then?" "In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley." "Humbug!" cried Scrooge. "I tell you, humbug!" "You don't believe in me," said the ghost. "No, I don't," said Scrooge. "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your senses?" asked the spirit. "Because," said Scrooge, "the slightest disorder of the stomach can make them cheat. You might be a bit of underdone potato, a blob of mustard, a crumb of cheese. Yes, there's more of gravy than of grave about you." At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain. "Man of the worldly mind," replied the ghost, "do you believe in me or not?" I do," replied Scrooge, dropping to his knees and covering his face. I must. But why do you come to me? Why here? Why now?" "Hear me," bellowed the ghost. "I wear the chains of greed I forged in life. I forged it of my own free will, and it is against my will that I wear it now. You wear such a chain yourself, Ebenezer Scrooge. It was as long as mine 7 Christmases ago, and it has grown much since then." "No," cried Scrooge. "You were always a good friend to me. A good man, Jacob. An honest man. A good man of business." "Business!" cried Marley. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. And I ignored all. The crying mother seeking to feed her child, the sick woman begging for help, the simple charity I might have given." "What do you want of me?" cried Scrooge. "I am here to warn you that you have yet a chance of escaping my fate. You will be haunted tonight by 3 spirits." I think I would rather not," said Scrooge, who clung to his chair so tightly now that his knuckles turned stark white. "Without their visits," said the ghost, "you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tonight, when the bell tolls 1. The spectre suddenly rose and beckoned Scrooge over to the window. As it walked, the glass rose bit by bit until the chill of the winter night was full upon them. As Scrooge looked through it, he saw, to his amazement, all manner of ghosts and shades, all wrapped in chains similar to Marleys, weeping and wailing, reaching out to touch their fellow man on the streets, but passing through them like wind. "Who are they?" asked Scrooge, horrified.
"They are man,"
replied the ghost.
"We are all man. Man seeking to do what we would not in life. But alas, alas, it is too late.
And with that final cry, Marley floated out upon the dark, bleak night, closing the window behind him.